When Maid Zahara Price is unexpectedly invited to the Whitmore charity gala, old wounds and buried dreams resurface. But one song, sung in Defiance, changes everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun filtered through the large windows of the Whitmore mansion as Zahara Price quietly made her way through the enormous living room. At 26, she moved with practiced efficiency, dusting surfaces that were already spotless. The Whitmores expected perfection, and Zahara delivered it without complaint. "Don't forget the piano," Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the silence, causing Zahara to flinch slightly. Zahara turned to see Maris Whitmore standing in the doorway, already dressed in designer clothes despite the early hour. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant bob, and her makeup was flawless. "Yes, ma'am," Zahara replied softly, her eyes lowered. Maris walked into the room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She ran a finger across the mantelpiece, checking for dust that wasn't there. "We're having guests tonight. Important people. I need everything to be perfect," Maris said, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore." Maris paused by the grand piano that dominated one corner of the room. It was a beautiful instrument, rarely played, but always polished. "Do you play, Zahara?" Maris asked suddenly. Zahara's hand stilled on the duster. "No, ma'am." You have the hands for it. Long fingers." Maris's gaze was calculating. "Well, make sure you're invisible tonight. The senator doesn't like to be reminded that there are regular people in these homes." "Yes, ma'am." As Maris left the room, Zahara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She approached the piano carefully, almost reverently. Her fingers hovered over the keys but didn't touch them. For a moment she was 16 again, standing on a small stage in a crowded church, her voice soaring to the rafters, people wiping tears from their eyes. But that was before Marcus had taken her trust, her songs, and left her with nothing but shame. Before she'd learned that having a gift sometimes meant having it stolen. Zahara quickly wiped down the piano and moved on. In the kitchen, the staff was busy preparing for the evening's dinner party. Luann, the cook who had been with the Whitmores for 15 years, gave Zahara a sympathetic smile. "She's in one of her moods today," Luann said, kneading dough with practiced hands. "She's always in a mood," replied Carl, the gardener, who was having his morning coffee at the kitchen table. "It's fine," Zahara said. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it," Luann said firmly. "That woman has everything but happiness, and she blames everyone but herself." Zahara shrugged. "The job pays well. My mom needs the medical care." Carl shook his head. "You're a saint, Zahara Price. A real saint." Zahara gave a small smile, but said nothing. She wasn't a saint. She was just doing what needed to be done, and if that meant enduring Maris Whitmore's subtle cruelties, then so be it. Graham Whitmore arrived home just as Zahara was finishing the upstairs bedrooms. She heard his voice downstairs, followed by Maris's higher, sharper tones. They were arguing again. They were always arguing. Zahara tried not to listen, but in a house this big, voices carried in strange ways. "I don't care about the senator's opinion," Graham was saying. "This is our home, not a stage for your social climbing." "You never care about anything," Maris shot back. "Do you know how hard I've worked to get him here? If we can get his support for your new project, I don't want his support if it comes with strings attached." "Everything comes with strings attached, Graham. That's how the world works. Not that you'd know, hiding in your office all day." There was a heavy silence, and then Graham's voice, quieter now. "I'll be there tonight. I'll be polite. But don't expect me to beg for his approval." Footsteps approached, and Zahara quickly resumed her work, pretending she hadn't heard a thing. The door to the master bedroom opened, and Graham Whitmore walked in, loosening his tie. He stopped when he saw her. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was in here." "I was just finishing, Mr. Whitmore," Zahara said, gathering her cleaning supplies. Graham Whitmore was a tall man with kind eyes that always looked tired. At 42, his dark hair was starting to gray at the temples, but it suited him. Unlike his wife, who demanded attention with her presence, Graham seemed to carry himself with a quiet dignity that required no announcement. "You're Zahara, right?" he asked. Surprised that he knew her name, Zahara nodded. "Luann speaks highly of you," he said with a small smile. "Says you're the only one who helps her with the dishes, even though it's not your job." Zahara didn't know what to say to that. "It's no trouble, sir." Graham looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he just nodded. "Well, don't let me keep you." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As Zahara left the room, she could feel his eyes on her back, not in the way some men looked at her. like she was something to be consumed, but with a curiosity that was almost respectful. That night, Zahara stayed late to help with the dinner party. Normally, she would have gone home by now, but Luann had asked for an extra pair of hands, and the overtime pay would help with her mother's medications. She moved silently around the edges of the dining room, refilling water glasses and clearing plates. The conversation at the table flowed around her as if she were invisible, just as Maris wanted. "The problem with these new regulations," the senator was saying, "is that they stifle innovation. Wouldn't you agree, Graham?" Graham, who had been staring into his wine glass, looked up. "Actually, I think they're necessary. The tech industry has had too little oversight for too long." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Maris's smile became fixed. "What my husband means," she said with a forced laugh, "is that while oversight is important, the current approach is too heavy-handed." "That's not what I said," Graham said quietly. The senator raised an eyebrow. "Well, it seems there's some disagreement in the Whitmore household." "Not at all," Maris said quickly. "Graham is just tired. He's been working so hard on this new project. It's revolutionary, really. Tell him about it, darling." As Graham reluctantly began to explain his work, Zahara moved to clear his plate. He paused mid-sentence, looking up at her with a grateful smile, as if her interruption was a welcome relief. "Thank you, Zahara," he said. Maris's eyes narrowed at the exchange. "Zahara," she said, her voice honey-sweet, "since you're here, why don't you bring us some more wine? The good bottle from the cellar." "Yes, ma'am," Zahara replied, trying not to show her discomfort. She knew very little about the Whitmore's wine collection. "I'll show her," Graham said, standing up. "I've been wanting to stretch my legs anyway." "Graham," Maris said, her tone warning. "It'll just take a minute," he replied, already heading toward the door. "Zahara, this way, please." Bewildered, Zahara followed him out of the dining room and toward the cellar door. The wine cellar was cool and dimly lit. Racks of bottles lined the walls, organized in a system Zahara couldn't begin to understand. Graham walked straight to a section near the back. "My wife likes to make people uncomfortable," he said without preamble. "I apologize for that." Zahara blinked, taken aback by his directness. "It's all right, sir." "No, it's not." He selected a bottle and turned to face her. "But you handle it with grace. That's rare." Zahara didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to employers who saw her as more than a function, a task performer. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Whitmore." Graham studied her for a moment. "You're different from the others she's hired. You watch, you listen, but you never seem to judge." "It's not my place to judge," Zahara said carefully. "Isn't it? We're all human. We all have the right to our opinions. Some of us just can't afford to express them, sir." Graham looked surprised, then let out a small laugh. "Fair enough." He handed her the bottle. "Here, this should satisfy Her Royal Highness." Despite herself, Zahara smiled at the joke. It was small, this moment of conspiracy, but it felt significant somehow. "You should smile more often," Graham said. "It lights up your face." The comment, innocent as it was, made Zahara's smile fade. She'd heard lines like that before from men who wanted something from her. Graham seemed to realize his mistake immediately. "I'm sorry. That was inappropriate." "It's fine, sir." "No, it's not. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I just meant, you seem sad sometimes, and you shouldn't have to be." Before Zahara could respond, the cellar door opened, and Maris's voice called down. "Graham, what's taking so long? The senator is waiting." "Coming," Graham called back. To Zahara, he said quietly, "Duty calls." As they climbed the stairs together, Zahara couldn't help but wonder about Graham Whitmore. He was nothing like she'd expected, nothing like what the gossip among the staff had led her to believe. Maybe there was more to the man than the money, the name, the failing marriage. Maybe, like her, he was hiding something too. The next morning, Zahara arrived at work to find the house in an uproar. Maris was on the phone in the living room, her voice carrying throughout the first floor. "No, it has to be perfect. Yes, all 200 guests. The governor confirmed yesterday. No, I don't care how much it costs. This is the social event of the season." Luann caught Zahara's arm as she entered the kitchen. "She's planning the annual charity gala," she explained in a low voice. "It's in 3 weeks and apparently nothing is going right." "Is it always this intense?" Zahara asked. "Worse," Carl chimed in from his usual spot at the table. "Last year she fired the florist 2 days before the event because the roses weren't the exact shade of pink she wanted." Luann nodded. "The gala is Maris's baby. It's her chance to show off to all the other rich wives. And this year, With Graham's new project about to launch, she's even more determined to make a splash. "Speaking of Graham," Carl said, lowering his voice even further, "did you hear their fight last night after the guests left?" Luann shot him a warning look. "That's none of our business, Carl." "What?" "I'm just saying, I've never heard him raise his voice like that before. Whatever she did, it must have been bad." Zahara pretended not to be interested, but her mind flashed back to the wine cellar, to Graham's unexpected kindness. The kitchen door swung open, and Maris herself walked in, ending all conversation. She looked impeccable as always, but there was a tightness around her eyes that hinted at stress. "Zahara," she said, ignoring the others, "I need you to come with me. Now." Confused, Zahara followed Maris through the house and up to the master bedroom. Laid out on the bed were several evening gowns, each more beautiful than the last. "The gala is in 3 weeks, Maris said, inspecting one of the dresses. "I need to decide which one to wear." "They're all beautiful, ma'am," Zahara said, uncertain why Maris had brought her here for this. "Yes, they are." Maris held up a midnight blue gown against her body, examining her reflection in the full-length mirror. "Do you know what the theme is this year, Zahara?" "No, ma'am." "Charleston Nights, celebrating the cultural heritage of our lovely city." Maris's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Graham insisted we include performers from all backgrounds. For diversity." The way she said the word made it clear what she thought of the idea. "I think that sounds nice," Zahara ventured. Maris turned to look at her, eyes sharp. "Do you now? Well, since you're so interested in the gala, perhaps you should attend." Zahara blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, you should come to the gala this year," Maris said, her smile widening. "You'll get to see how real women carry themselves." The words were like a slap. Zahara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She knew what Maris was doing, inviting her as a spectacle, a way to put her in her place. I don't think that would be appropriate, ma'am," she managed to say. "Nonsense. I insist." Maris turned back to the mirror, dismissing Zahara's discomfort. "You can help serve the drinks. It'll be educational for you." Zahara stood frozen, torn between dignity and practicality. She needed this job. Her mother needed the medical care it provided. But this felt like too much. The bedroom door opened, and Graham walked in, already dressed for work. He stopped when he saw the scene before him. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between them. "I was just inviting Zahara to the gala," Maris said sweetly. "As part of the staff, of course." Graham's eyes met Zahara's, and she saw understanding there and something else. Anger, but not at her. "Actually," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I think Zahara should come as a guest." Maris's head snapped toward him. "What?" "A guest," Graham repeated. "We're celebrating Charleston's diversity, aren't we? Zahara is as much a part of this community as anyone who'll be attending." "Graham, be serious," Maris scoffed. "She's the help." "She's a person," Graham countered, "with as much right to enjoy the evening as anyone else." He turned to Zahara. "You'd honor us by attending. Please, don't let her scare you out of the room." Zahara looked between them, caught in the middle of a battle she hadn't asked to join. But there was something in Graham's eyes, a plea, a promise of protection, that made her nod slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. I would be honored to attend." Maris's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "Fine," she said tightly. "As a guest." "How progressive of you, Graham." She turned to Zahara. "I hope you have something suitable to wear. We wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself." With that, she swept past them both and out of the room, leaving a charged silence in her wake. "I'm sorry about that," Graham said after a moment. "Maris can be—" "It's all right," Zahara said quickly. "Really, Mr. Whitmore, you don't have to do this. I don't need to go to the gala. But I want you to," he said simply. "And not as some kind of statement or to upset my wife. He hesitated. "I think you might enjoy the music. We have a wonderful jazz quartet coming." There was something in the way he said it, as if he knew. But he couldn't know. No one here knew about her past, about the singing, about what had been taken from her. "Thank you," she said finally. "That's very kind." Graham smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I'm not kind, Zahara. I'm just tired of watching my wife treat good people badly." He checked his watch. "I have to go, but I meant what I said. I hope you'll come." As he left, Zahara remained standing among the beautiful dresses, feeling like she had just stepped onto a stage she'd been avoiding for years. That night, in her small apartment across town, Zahara told her mother about the invitation. "The Whitmore Gala?" Esther Price's eyes widened. Baby, that's the biggest society event of the year. Everyone who's anyone in Charleston goes to that thing. I know, Mama. That's why I can't go. Zahara sat on the edge of her mother's bed, smoothing the quilt with nervous hands. Mrs. Whitmore only invited me to humiliate me. But Mr. Whitmore invited you as a guest, Esther pointed out. That means something. It means he feels sorry for me. Esther reached out to take her daughter's hand. Despite the pain that arthritis brought to her joints, her grip was still strong. Zahara Joy Price, when are you going to stop hiding? I'm not hiding, Mama. Yes, you are. Ever since what happened with Marcus, I don't want to talk about that. Zahara cut in, pulling her hand away. Esther sighed. It's been 10 years, baby. 10 years since you've let anyone hear that beautiful voice God gave you. 10 years of working jobs beneath your talent, keeping your head down, staying invisible. I have good reasons for that. You had good reasons, but they're starting to look a lot like excuses. Esther's voice softened. What Marcus did was wrong. Stealing your songs, taking credit for your talent. It was a terrible betrayal, but you're punishing yourself more than you're punishing him. Zahara stood up abruptly. I'm not having this conversation again. Then have a different one, Esther said. Tell me why you won't go to this gala. Because I don't belong there, because those people will look at me and see someone who doesn't fit, who isn't good enough. And since when do you care what people like that think? Esther challenged. The daughter I raised would walk into that room with her head held high, looking every bit as beautiful and worthy as anyone else there. Zahara felt tears threatening, but pushed them back. I don't even have anything to wear. At this, Esther's face broke into a mischievous smile. Now that I can help with, she pointed to her closet. Top shelf in the back. There's a garment bag. Curious despite herself, Zahara went to the closet and reached up to the shelf. Her fingers found a plastic garment bag, dusty with age. She pulled it down and unzipped it. Inside was a dress the color of sunset, deep coral silk that caught the light as it moved. It was simple, but elegant, with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt. Mama, Zahara breathed. Where did this come from? It was mine, Esther said, a faraway look in her eyes. From when I used to sing at the Blue Note, before I met your father. A designer gave it to me after he heard me sing. Said a voice like mine deserved a dress to match. Zahara had heard stories about her mother's brief singing career, cut short by marriage and motherhood, but she'd never seen evidence of it before. I can't wear this, she said softly. You can, and you will, Esther insisted. It's time for that dress to be worn again by another Price woman with a gift. Mama, I don't sing anymore. Maybe not, but you still have the gift, whether you use it or not. Esther's eyes were bright with determination. Wear the dress, Zahara. Go to the gala. Show those people who you really are. Looking down at the beautiful dress, Zahara felt something stir inside her, a longing she had buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it was there, a longing to be seen, to be heard, to stop hiding. All right, she said finally. I'll go. Esther smiled, satisfied. Good. Now come here and help your old mama to the bathroom. All this excitement has got my bladder working overtime. Zahara laughed, grateful for her mother's way of breaking tension. As she helped Esther out of bed, her mind was already at the gala, imagining what it would be like to step into that world, not as the invisible maid, but as herself. For the first time in years, the thought didn't fill her with dread. Instead, there was a flicker of something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. The days leading up to the gala were tense at the Whitmore mansion. Maris was in a constant state of controlled frenzy, overseeing every detail with military precision. She barely acknowledged Zahara's presence, which was both a relief and oddly unsettling. Graham, on the other hand, seemed to make a point of speaking to Zahara whenever their paths crossed. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that could be misconstrued, just simple kindness, asking about her day, thanking her for her work. One afternoon, Zahara was dusting the bookshelves in his home office when he entered unexpectedly. Sorry to interrupt, he said. I forgot some papers. It's no trouble, sir. I'll come back later. No need. He crossed to his desk and rifled through some folders. Actually, I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to ask if you're still planning to come to the gala. Zahara hesitated. Yes, sir, if that's still all right. More than all right. He found what he was looking for and straightened up. I was thinking, would you like to see the venue before the event? The decorations are being set up today, and I'm heading over there now to check on progress. The invitation was unexpected. I don't want to impose. You wouldn't be. To be honest, I could use the company. These events are Maris's domain, and the decorators look at me like I'm going to ruin everything just by breathing near the flower arrangements. That drew a small smile from Zahara. I can imagine. So will you come? I promise to have you back here in an hour. Zahara knew she should say no. This was crossing a line, not in a romantic way, but in the carefully maintained boundary between employer and employee. Yet there was something in Graham's eyes, a loneliness that matched her own, that made her nod. Yes, sir, thank you. The venue was the historic Belmont Hall, one of Charleston's most prestigious event spaces. Workers were bustling about, hanging lights, arranging flowers, setting up tables. The theme of Charleston nights was evident in the deep blues and purples, the jazz motifs, the elegant touches that hinted at the city's rich cultural heritage. What do you think? Graham asked as they stood in the center of the ballroom. It's beautiful, Zahara said honestly. She had never been inside Belmont Hall before, had only passed by it on her way to other places, other lives. Graham nodded. Maris has an eye for these things, I'll give her that. He looked around the room with a strange detachment. Sometimes I think she would have been happier as an event planner than as my wife. The candor of the statement caught Zahara off guard. Mr. Whitmore. Graham, he interrupted. Please, when we're not at the house, I'd prefer it if you called me Graham. I don't think that would be appropriate, sir. Probably not, he agreed with a rueful smile. But very little about my life feels appropriate these days. He led her to the stage area, where a gleaming grand piano stood ready. Do you know what I regret, Zahara? He asked suddenly. She shook her head. I regret that I've never used my position to do anything meaningful. I have all this money, all this influence, and what do I do with it? Attend galas and make speeches and pretend to care about things that don't matter. Your company does good work, Zahara said. I've read about your initiatives in education, in healthcare. Graham looked surprised. You've read about my work? I like to know who I'm working for, she said simply. He studied her for a moment. You're a remarkable woman, Zahara Price. The compliment made her uncomfortable, not because it felt inappropriate, but because it felt true. And Zahara had spent so long trying not to be remarkable, trying not to be noticed, that being seen, truly seen, was terrifying. We should head back, she said, glancing at her watch. Mrs. Whitmore will be wondering where I am. Graham looked like he wanted to say more, but he nodded. Of course. As they walked back to his car, a worker testing the sound system started playing a jazz standard. At last, the Etta James classic. The notes floated through the hall, rich and soulful. Zahara stopped walking, caught by the music. It had been her grandmother's favorite song, the one she'd first learned to sing. Are you all right? Graham asked, noticing her stillness. Yes, she said, forcing herself to move again. It's a beautiful song. Graham's eyes were thoughtful. Yes, it is. And it will be even more beautiful at the gala, with a full audience to appreciate it. As they drove back to the mansion, Zahara found herself wondering what would happen if she let herself be remarkable again, if she stepped out of the shadows and into the light. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to find out. The night of the gala arrived with a flurry of activity at the Whitmore mansion. Extra staff had been brought in to help with preparations, leaving Zahara strangely free. Maris had made it clear that she didn't want Zahara involved in the final arrangements. A small mercy, though Zahara suspected it was less about kindness and more about keeping her out of sight. You should go home early, Luann told her as they stood in the kitchen, watching servers load trays of hors d'oeuvres into vans. Get ready for your big night. I don't know if I'm going anymore, Zahara admitted. The weight of what she was considering, stepping into that world, being seen, felt heavier with each passing hour. Luann put her hands on her hips. Now, don't you dare back out. Carl and I are looking forward to seeing you all dressed up. She lowered her voice. Besides, I heard Mrs. Whitmore telling Mr. Graham that you probably wouldn't show up. Said you'd realize your place and stay home. Something hardened in Zahara's chest. Did she now? And Mr. Graham got real quiet, the way he does when he's angry, but trying not to show it. Then he said, Zahara has more courage than you give her credit for. Made Mrs. Whitmore storm off in a huff. The thought of Graham defending her, believing in her when she barely believed in herself, stirred something in Zahara that she'd kept dormant for too long. All right, she said. I'll be there. Back at her apartment, Zahara stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, hardly recognizing herself. Her mother's dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The coral silk complemented her dark skin, and the simple elegance of the design made her look like someone who belonged at a place like Belmont Hall. Esther sat on the bed, watching with shining eyes as Zahara applied a touch of lipstick. Look at you, she said softly. Just look at you. Zahara turned, suddenly uncertain. Is it too much? I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. Baby, you look exactly right, like the star you were always meant to be. Mama, please. I'm just a maid going to a party. You've never been just anything. Esther's voice was firm. And tonight everyone's going to see that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Zahara's neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, poked her head in. Car's here, she announced. And honey, you look like $1 million. Zahara had splurged on a taxi for the night, another expense she couldn't really afford, but she wasn't about to walk to Belmont Hall in her mother's silk dress and the one pair of heels she owned. Now remember, Esther said, as Zahara gathered her small clutch purse, head high, back straight, and don't let anyone make you feel small. You're Esther Price's daughter, and you come from a long line of women who never let the world tell them who they were. Zahara bent to kiss her mother's cheek. I'll remember. And baby? Esther caught her hand. If the moment comes, don't be afraid to sing. Zahara's throat tightened. Mama, I know, but if it happens, if the opportunity presents itself, just remember that your voice is a gift, and gifts aren't meant to be buried. With those words echoing in her mind, Zahara left for the gala, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Belmont Hall was transformed. The early evening light filtered through the tall windows, catching on crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors. Music from a jazz quartet filled the air, providing a sophisticated backdrop to the buzz of conversation from Charleston's elite. Zahara stepped through the grand entrance, immediately feeling out of place despite her careful preparation. Women in designer gowns adorned with jewelry worth more than her yearly salary glided past. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos clustered in groups, talking business and politics. For a moment she considered turning around and leaving, but then she remembered her mother's words and straightened her shoulders. She belonged here as much as anyone, at least for tonight. Name? Asked the attendant at the door, a young man with a clipboard who didn't bother to hide his skepticism as he looked her over. Zahara Price, she said, proud that her voice didn't waver. He scanned his list, eyebrows rising in surprise when he found her name. Oh, yes, you're on the list. Guest of Mr. Whitmore. The way he said it made her flush with both embarrassment and anger. She knew what he was thinking, what everyone would think when they saw her. A young black woman alone, invited by the wealthy white host. That's right, she said, lifting her chin. Thank you. She moved past him into the ballroom, feeling eyes on her as she went. The decorations were even more stunning than they had been during her preview with Graham. The theme of Charleston Nights had been executed perfectly, with touches that honored the city's rich and complex history. Zahara made her way to the edge of the room, finding a quiet corner from which to observe. She recognized many of the guests from society pages and news reports, politicians, business leaders, old money families, whose names graced buildings throughout the city. And scattered among them, members of the Whitmore household staff dressed in black and white, serving drinks and food with practiced invisibility. Several of them did double takes when they saw her, and Zahara offered small smiles of solidarity. She had been in their shoes not so long ago, was still in their shoes really, just wearing a pretty dress for one night. You came. Zahara turned to find Graham Whitmore standing beside her, handsome in a classic black tuxedo. His eyes were warm with approval as they took in her appearance. I did, she said simply. I'm glad. He gestured to her dress. You look beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Graham, he reminded her gently. At least for tonight. She hesitated, then nodded. Graham, can I get you a drink? Champagne? Wine? Just water, please. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on her choice. I'll be right back. As he moved toward the bar, Zahara noticed Maris across the room, holding court with a group of women her age. Maris hadn't seen her yet, and Zahara found herself hoping it could stay that way for as long as possible. Graham returned with 2 glasses of water. Not a drinker, he asked, handing one to her. Not tonight. I want to keep a clear head. He clinked his glass against hers. Smart. I should follow your example more often. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowd. I don't do well at these things, Graham confessed suddenly. All this performance, the small talk, the networking, the subtle power plays. It exhausts me. Then why do it? Because it's expected. Because it's easier than fighting. He sighed. Because somewhere along the way I forgot how to say no to things that don't matter, and yes to things that do. There was such honesty in his words, such vulnerability, that Zahara felt compelled to offer some truth of her own. I used to sing, she said quietly, before I worked for you. I was good, really good, but I stopped. Graham looked at her with genuine interest. Why? Someone I trusted stole my songs, took credit for my voice, made me feel like I was nothing. She shrugged, trying to make it seem less important than it was. So I stopped singing. That's a tragedy, Graham said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her look up at him in surprise. A real tragedy, not just for you, but for everyone who never got to hear you. Before Zahara could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A tall, strikingly handsome black man in his mid-30s had arrived, causing a stir among the guests. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, stopping to shake hands and exchange greetings. Zahara went very still. Marcus, Graham frowned. You know him? Marcus Wells, he's the one I told you about, the one who stole my songs. Understanding dawned on Graham's face, followed quickly by anger. What is he doing here? He's famous now, has his own record label. I heard he moved back to Charleston recently, but I never thought... Marcus hadn't seen her yet, but it was only a matter of time in the crowded ballroom. Zahara felt sick at the thought of facing him after all these years. Do you want to leave? Graham asked, his voice gentle. She considered it, the pull to run almost overwhelming, but then she thought of her mother, of all the years she'd spent hiding, of the voice she'd buried. No, she said finally. I'm done running from him. Graham nodded, respect evident in his eyes. Whatever you need, I'm here. Before she could thank him, Maris appeared at Graham's side, her smile tight as she took in the scene before her. Graham, darling, the mayor is looking for you. Her eyes slid to Zahara, widening in exaggerated surprise. Well, you actually came, and in such an interesting dress. Good evening, Mrs. Whitmore, Zahara said politely, refusing to rise to the bait. The gala is beautiful. You've done a wonderful job. The compliment seemed to catch Maris off guard. She blinked, then recovered her composure. Yes, well, it took months of planning. Not that you would understand what goes into something like this. Actually, Graham interjected, Zahara was just telling me some fascinating insights about the historical significance of the music selections. She has quite an ear for jazz. Maris's smile became even more strained. How educational for you, darling. She turned to Zahara. Since you're here as a guest, you should mingle, meet people. You'll find it illuminating to see how we live. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Zahara forced herself to remain calm, to remember that Maris's cruelty came from her own insecurities. Thank you for the suggestion, Mrs. Whitmore. I think I will mingle a bit. Excellent, Maris said, linking her arm through Graham's. And we must attend to our other guests. Come along, Graham. With a last apologetic look at Zahara, Graham allowed himself to be led away. Zahara took a deep breath and turned to face the room again. As she did, her eyes met Marcus's across the crowd. He had seen her, and from the way his expression changed, shock, followed by something harder to read, he had recognized her instantly. For a moment, they stared at each other, 10 years of silence stretching between them. Then Marcus started making his way toward her. Zahara's first instinct was to flee, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She had spent too long giving this man power over her life, her choices, her voice. Zahara Price, Marcus said when he reached her, his voice as smooth and charismatic as she remembered. I never thought I'd see you again. Hello, Marcus. He looked her up and down, taking in the coral dress, the simple elegance of her appearance. You look good. Different, but good. You look exactly the same, she replied, and it was true. The same winning smile, the same confident posture, the same eyes that had once made her believe he hung the moon. What are you doing here? He asked. Last I heard you'd given up music. I did. She was pleased at how steady her voice sounded. I work for the Whitmores now. Understanding dawned on his face. Ah, your staff. I'm a guest tonight, she corrected him. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a knowing smirk playing at his lips. A guest of Mr. Whitmore's, I imagine. The implication made her blood boil. You haven't changed a bit, have you? Still making assumptions, still thinking the worst of people. Come on, Zahara. We both know how the world works. No, Marcus, we know how your world works, where people use each other, steal from each other, build success on the backs of others. He had the grace to look uncomfortable at that. Look, about what happened. I don't want to talk about what happened, Zahara cut him off. It was a long time ago. Then why are you still so angry? The question caught her off guard. Was she still angry? Yes, of course she was. But it wasn't just anger she felt. It was grief for the dreams she'd abandoned, the voice she'd silenced. I'm not angry, Marcus. I'm just not interested in revisiting the past. He studied her for a moment. You know, I always wondered what happened to you, why you disappeared. I didn't disappear, I chose a different path. A path that led you to being a maid for rich white folks? Marcus shook his head. That's not the Zahara I knew. The Zahara I knew had fire, had ambition. The Zahara you knew trusted you, she said quietly. And you betrayed that trust. A flicker of something, regret perhaps or shame, crossed his face. I was young and stupid. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. It wasn't personal. It was personal to me. Zahara took a step back. Goodbye, Marcus. She turned and walked away, heart pounding but head high. It wasn't the confrontation she'd imagined during all those sleepless nights over the years. There had been no dramatic showdown, no tearful accusations, just the quiet recognition that the man who had once meant everything to her now meant nothing at all. The evening progressed, and Zahara found herself surprisingly at ease. Several staff members came to chat with her during their breaks, and she even had a pleasant conversation with an older couple who turned out to be supporters of the community center where her mother used to volunteer. Graham sought her out periodically, checking that she was comfortable, introducing her to people who wouldn't judge her presence. Maris, meanwhile, kept her distance, though Zahara often felt her watchful gaze from across the room. As dinner concluded and the formal program began, Zahara found a seat at one of the less prominent tables. Graham took the stage to welcome everyone and thank them for supporting the charity the Gala was raising funds for, a music education program for underprivileged youth in Charleston. Music has the power to transform lives, he was saying, his voice confident and clear, to bridge divides, to heal wounds, to tell stories that might otherwise go untold. That's why Whitmore Technologies is proud to announce a 5-year commitment to fund music programs in schools throughout Charleston's most underserved communities. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. From her seat, Zahara could see Maris's surprised expression. Clearly, this was not part of the planned script. And now, Graham continued, as we celebrate the rich musical heritage of our city, I'd like to invite you all to enjoy a performance by the Marcus Wells Quartet. Marcus took the stage to appreciative applause, his band following behind him. They launched into a set of jazz standards, performed with undeniable skill. Despite everything, Zahara found herself moved by the music, by the familiar melodies that had once been such a part of her life. During a break between songs, Marcus stepped to the microphone. I'd like to dedicate this next song to someone special in the audience tonight. Someone who reminded me where I came from and what music is really about. His eyes found Zahara. This one's for you, Z. I think you'll recognize it. The band began to play, and Zahara's heart nearly stopped. It was her song, the first one she'd ever written, the one Marcus had claimed as his own, the one that had launched his career. But he was playing it differently now, with a gentleness, an acknowledgement of its origins. Beside her, an older woman leaned over. Isn't this his big hit, the one that put him on the map? Yes, Zahara said softly. It is. Such a beautiful melody, so soulful. Always wondered where he found the inspiration. Zahara didn't respond, her eyes fixed on Marcus as he played. Was this his way of apologizing? Of acknowledging finally what he had taken from her? When the song ended, Marcus looked directly at her and gave a small nod. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something, a recognition at least of the truth. As the quartet finished their set to enthusiastic applause, Maris took the stage. Her smile was dazzling, her evening gown, a deep sapphire blue that made her blonde hair seem to glow, catching the light as she moved. Wasn't that wonderful? She said into the microphone. Such talent, such passion, and speaking of talent, her eyes found Zahara in the crowd, and something in her expression made Zahara's stomach drop. We have someone very special with us tonight, someone from our own household who I've just learned has quite a gift. A murmur went through the audience, heads turning to follow Maris's gaze. Zahara Price, Maris called out, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes hard. Why don't you come up here and share your beautiful voice with us? Graham tells me you're quite the singer. The room went silent. Zahara sat frozen, the blood draining from her face. This was Maris's revenge, public humiliation, just as she had planned all along. Graham stepped forward, clearly trying to intervene, but Maris held onto the microphone. Don't be shy, Zahara. We're all so eager to hear you. People were staring now, whispering. Zahara felt the walls closing in, felt the old panic rising. She hadn't sung in public in 10 years, Hadn't sung at all except in the shower or while her mother slept. She couldn't do this. Not here, not now, not like this. But then, from across the room, she caught Graham's eye. He looked horrified, angry on her behalf, but there was something else in his expression too. Belief. He believed in her voice, in her right to be heard. And suddenly, Zahara was tired. Tired of hiding, tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people define who she was and what she could do. Slowly, she stood. The room seemed to hold its breath as she made her way to the stage. Maris's smile faltered slightly. She hadn't expected Zahara to accept the challenge. "What will you sing for us?" Maris asked, reluctantly handing over the microphone. Zahara took it, her hand steadier than she felt. "I think I'll let the pianist decide," she said quietly. "Any requests?" The young man at the piano looked surprised but thoughtful. "How about Summertime? Classic but not overdone." Zahara nodded. It was her grandmother's favorite, one of the first songs she'd learned. "That would be perfect." Maris, realizing that her plan was backfiring, stepped back with a tight smile. "Well, this should be interesting." As Maris left the stage, Zahara stood alone before the crowd of strangers, feeling exposed and vulnerable. The pianist began the gentle introduction, the familiar notes washing over her. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, of her grandmother, of all the women in her family who had faced down fear and found their voices. Then she began to sing. The first note was tentative, barely audible. But as the music continued, something broke open inside Zahara, a dam that had held back not just her voice, but her whole self for too long. "Summertime, and the livin' is easy." Her voice gained strength, filling the room with a richness and depth that seemed impossible from someone so slender, so seemingly fragile. It was a voice that carried history in it, the pain and resilience of generations, the sorrow and joy of a life fully lived. "Fish are jumping and the cotton is high." The room fell into stunned silence. Servers stopped moving, glasses poised mid-air. Conversations died. Even the rustle of expensive fabric stilled as everyone turned to watch, to listen. "Your daddy's rich, and your mama's good-looking." Zahara opened her eyes, her gaze finding Graham in the crowd. He was utterly still, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. Beside him, Maris stood rigid with shock and something that might have been fear. "So hush, little baby, don't you cry." As Zahara sang the final verse, her voice soaring with a freedom she had denied herself for too long, she felt something shift inside her. The shame, the fear, the sense of being less than, it all fell away, replaced by a certainty that this was who she was meant to be. Not hidden, not silent, but heard. The last note hung in the air, a perfect, shimmering thing. Then silence. A silence so complete it seemed the whole world was holding its breath. And then applause. Thunderous, overwhelming applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of Belmont Hall. People were on their feet, some wiping away tears, others calling out in appreciation. At the back of the room, Marcus stood with an expression of awe and regret. He had known her talent, had recognized its value enough to steal it, but even he hadn't understood the full measure of what she could do. Zahara stood in the spotlight, trembling with emotion, but refusing to break. She had done it. After all these years, she had found her voice again. As she left the stage on unsteady legs, she was surrounded by people offering congratulations, asking questions, pressing business cards into her hands. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. Graham made his way through the crowd to her side. "Zahara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't have words." "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing I could. I didn't just believe it, I knew it." His eyes were intense, filled with something that made her heart beat faster. "You're extraordinary." Before she could respond, Maris appeared, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Well," she said tightly, "that was quite a performance. I had no idea our maid was so talented." "Maris," Graham warned. "What?" "I'm complimenting her." Maris's smile was brittle. "Though I do wonder if perhaps you're in the wrong profession, Zahara. Perhaps you should be on stage rather than cleaning them." The barb was meant to hurt, to remind Zahara of her place, but Zahara wasn't the same woman who had arrived at the gala hours earlier, afraid and uncertain. "Perhaps I should," she agreed calmly. "Thank you for the suggestion, Mrs. Whitmore, and thank you for the invitation tonight. It's been illuminating for all of us." Maris's eyes narrowed at having her own words turned back on her. "Yes, well, I'm sure you must be tired." Don't feel you need to stay for the remainder of the evening. Actually, Graham interrupted, I was hoping Zahara would stay. There are several people who would like to speak with her about her talent. Graham, Maris hissed, may I have a word? In private? With a last apologetic look at Zahara, Graham followed his wife to a quieter corner of the room. Their conversation was heated but hushed, impossible to overhear in the noisy ballroom. Left alone momentarily, Zahara took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had sung, in public, and people had listened, really listened. That was incredible. She turned to find Marcus standing behind her, his expression unreadable. Thank you, she said cautiously. I mean it, Z. You're even better than I remembered. He hesitated. Look, I know I can't undo what I did, but for what it's worth, I'm sorry, really sorry. Zahara studied him, searching for the sincerity in his words. Why did you do it, Marcus? Why did you take my songs? He sighed, running a hand over his face. Because they were good, better than anything I could write, and because I thought I deserved success more than you did. I was ambitious and selfish and stupid. Yes, you were. And you disappeared. I looked for you, you know, to apologize, to make it right somehow. But you were just gone. I didn't want to be found, Zahara said simply. Especially not by you. Marcus nodded, accepting this. I understand that, but I want you to know something. Those songs, your songs, they meant something to people. They touched lives. I know that doesn't make what I did okay, but your voice still reached people, even if they didn't know it was yours. Zahara hadn't expected this conversation, hadn't prepared for the complexity of emotions it would bring up. There was still anger there, still hurt, but there was also a strange sense of closure. Thank you for telling me that, she said finally. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. You should be singing, Zahara. The world needs your voice. Maybe, she said, but if I sing again, it'll be on my terms. No one else's. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. He pulled a business card from his pocket and offered it to her. If you ever want to talk about music again, just talk. No strings attached. Give me a call. Zahara hesitated, then took the card. She didn't know if she would ever use it, but the gesture felt significant somehow, a bridge between her past and whatever future she might choose. As Marcus walked away, Graham returned to her side, looking troubled. Is everything all right? Zahara asked. Maris is upset, he said carefully. She feels that your performance overshadowed the event she worked so hard to plan. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. No, don't apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for. Graham ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. Maris, she's used to being the center of attention, to controlling every situation. Your talent threatened that control. Zahara nodded. She understood Maris better than Graham might realize. The insecurity beneath the perfect exterior. The fear of being replaced, of being found wanting. I should go, she said. I've caused enough trouble for one night. You haven't caused any trouble. You've given everyone here a gift. Graham touched her arm lightly. But if you want to leave, I understand. Let me call you a car. Thank you, but I already have a taxi arranged. Graham nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Zahara, what you did tonight, it was brave and beautiful. I hope you know that. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. Thank you for giving me the chance to remember who I am. No, he said softly. Thank you for showing me who you are. There was something in the way he looked at her, not with desire or possession, but with genuine admiration, with recognition of her as a person of value, of worth, that made Zahara's heart beat faster. It had been so long since anyone had seen her that way. Good night, Graham, she said, using his first name without hesitation this time. Good night, Zahara. I'll see you on Monday. Monday, when she would be back in her uniform, back to being invisible. The thought was strange now, almost impossible to imagine after tonight. As Zahara made her way through the crowd toward the exit, she heard her name called several times. People wanting to compliment her, to ask where she had trained, if she performed regularly. She answered politely but briefly, eager to get home to process everything that had happened. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. As she waited for her taxi, Zahara looked up at the stars, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She had faced her past tonight, both Marcus and her own fear, and she had reclaimed her voice, the gift she had buried for so long. Whatever came next, whether she returned to the Whitmore mansion on Monday or chose a different path entirely, she would face it with her head high and her voice strong, because tonight, Zahara Price had remembered who she was. And she wasn't about to forget again. The taxi pulled up to Zahara's apartment building just after midnight. She paid the driver and walked up the 3 flights of stairs, her mind still reeling from the events of the evening. The sound of the television told her that her mother was still awake, waiting up for her. "There she is," Esther said, as Zahara entered the small living room. "The belle of the ball." Zahara smiled, kicking off her heels with a grateful sigh. "How did you know?" "Mrs. Jenkins came by after her shift at the hospital. Said she'd been getting texts all night from her niece, who works catering at those fancy parties. Said you sang and brought the house down." "News travels fast," Zahara said, settling onto the couch beside her mother. "In Charleston, you know better than that. News travels at the speed of light." Esther studied her daughter's face. "So, you sang." It wasn't a question, but Zahara nodded anyway. "I sang. And it felt like coming home." Tears welled up unexpectedly. "Mama, I forgot what it was like. To let it out, to let people hear it, to stop hiding." Esther took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I've been waiting 10 years to hear you say that, baby girl. 10 long years." "I was so scared," Zahara admitted. "Even as I was doing it, I was terrified. But then, it was like something broke open inside me. Like I'd been carrying this weight for so long, I forgot it was there until I finally put it down. That's what happens when you deny who you are. It gets heavy." Esther's eyes were wise and knowing. "So what happens now?" It was the question Zahara had been asking herself all the way home. "I don't know. Part of me wants to go back to normal. Go to work on Monday, keep my head down, just go on like nothing happened. And the other part knows that's impossible." Zahara sighed, leaning her head back against the couch. "People heard me, Mama. Really heard me. There were even some music people there, producers, club owners. They gave me their card. That's wonderful. Is it? What if it's all happening again? What if I put myself out there and get hurt again?" Esther's expression turned stern. "Zahara Joy Price, are you really going to let what one no-good man did to you 10 years ago keep you from your gift for the rest of your life?" Put that way, it did sound foolish. "No buts. You got hurt. It was bad. But you survived and you're stronger now, wiser." Esther cupped her daughter's face. "And that voice of yours, it's even more powerful because of what you've been through. You think people were moved tonight? That's nothing compared to what you can do if you really let yourself shine." Zahara smiled through her tears. "When did you get so wise, Mama?" "Honey, I was born wise. You're just finally old enough to notice." Esther yawned, the effort of staying up clearly taking its toll. "Now help your old mama to bed. We can talk more about your bright future in the morning." As Zahara helped her mother get ready for bed, her mind kept returning to the gala, to the feeling of singing again, to the faces in the crowd, especially Graham's. The way he had looked at her, with wonder and something else, something she was afraid to name. "Mama," she said, as she tucked the blankets around Esther, "there's something else, something I didn't tell you." "About that handsome boss of yours?" Esther asked with a knowing smile. Zahara blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "Mrs. Jenkins mentioned that too. Said her niece said he couldn't take his eyes off you all night, that he looked at you like you hung the moon." Heat crept into Zahara's cheeks. "It's not like that. He's married. Unhappily, from what you've told me." "Still married," Zahara insisted. "And he's my boss. And he's white and rich and lives in a completely different world than I do." You keep telling yourself all the reasons it can't work. Meanwhile, your heart's already made up its mind, hasn't it?" Zahara didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Just be careful, baby," Esther said, her voice softening. "Not because he's white or rich or any of that, but because when a heart's been locked up as long as yours has, it can make some hasty decisions when it finally gets free." Zahara bent to kiss her mother's forehead. "I will be. I promise." Later, lying in her own bed, Zahara replayed the events of the night in her mind. The confrontation with Marcus, Maris's attempted humiliation, the moment she began to sing, the thunderous applause. And Graham's face, those tears in his eyes, the way he had looked at her afterward, like he was seeing her, really seeing her for the first time. Despite her exhaustion, sleep remained elusive. Too much had happened, too much had changed. By the time dawn began to lighten the sky outside her window, Zahara had made a decision. She would go to work on Monday. She would face whatever came next, but she would never hide her voice again. The Whitmore mansion was unnaturally quiet when Zahara arrived Monday morning. She had half expected whispers, stares, some acknowledgement of what had happened at the gala. Instead, there was an eerie silence. as if everyone was holding their breath. Luann met her in the kitchen with a quick hug. "You were amazing," she whispered. "Everyone's talking about it." "Doesn't seem like it," Zahara said, glancing around the empty kitchen. "That's because Mrs. Whitmore called a staff meeting first thing and made it clear that anyone who mentioned the gala or your singing would be fired on the spot." Zahara's heart sank. So that was how it was going to be. Maris was going to pretend nothing had happened, was going to try to put Zahara back in her place. "Where is she now?" Zahara asked. "Upstairs. She hasn't come down all morning." Luann lowered her voice even further. They had a huge fight when they got home from the gala. Everyone could hear it. Mr. Graham slept in one of the guest rooms. That news made Zahara uncomfortable. She didn't want to be the cause of more tension in their already strained marriage. "And Mr. Whitmore?" "Left for the office early, but he left something for you." Luann reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Asked me to give it to you when you arrived." Curious and a little apprehensive, Zahara took the envelope and slipped it into her own pocket. "Thanks, Luann." "Are you going to open it?" "Later," Zahara said. She wasn't ready to share whatever message Graham had left for her, even with Luann, who had always been kind. Zahara went about her morning duties as usual, dusting, vacuuming, making beds. It was strange how normal it felt and yet how different. She was the same person doing the same job, but she felt altered in some fundamental way, as if the act of singing, of being heard, had shifted something inside her that could never be put back the way it was. She was changing the towels in one of the guest bathrooms when she heard Maris's voice behind her. "I see you decided to come to work today." Zahara turned to find her employer standing in the doorway, immaculately dressed as always, but with dark circles under her eyes that even her expert makeup couldn't fully conceal. "Yes, ma'am," Zahara said calmly. "It's Monday." Maris's eyes narrowed. "Let's not play games, Zahara. After your performance at the gala, I half expected you to quit, to pursue your obvious ambitions elsewhere. I need this job, Mrs. Whitmore. My mother—" "Yes, your mother's medical bills. Very noble." Maris stepped into the bathroom, her heels clicking on the tile floor. "But we both know something has changed. You've changed." Zahara stood her ground. "I'm still the same person I was before." "Are you? Because the woman I hired was invisible, efficient, silent." Maris's voice hardened on the last word. She understood her place in this household. "With all due respect, Mrs. Whitmore, I've never forgotten my place. I do my job, and I do it well. The fact that I can sing doesn't change that, but it does change how people see you, how my husband sees you." There it was, the real issue. Zahara had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach twist with a mixture of guilt and indignation. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's nothing between me and your husband. Not yet," Maris said coldly. "But I saw the way he looked at you when you were singing. I know my husband, Zahara. I know when he's interested in someone." The implication hung in the air between them. Zahara felt her cheeks flush with anger. "I have never been anything but professional with Mr. Whitmore," she said firmly, "and he has never been anything but respectful toward me." "Of course that's what you'd say." Maris crossed her arms. "Let me be clear. I'm not firing you. That would be too obvious, especially after your little moment in the spotlight. But things will be different from now on." "Different how?" "You'll work different hours. When Graham is at the office, you'll report directly to me, not to Mrs. Peterson. And you will not, under any circumstances, be alone with my husband. Am I understood?" The unfairness of it all made Zahara want to quit on the spot, but she thought of her mother, of the medical bills that kept piling up, of the rent that was due next week. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." Maris smiled, satisfied with her victory. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Zahara, your singing was adequate. But if you're harboring dreams of something more, I'd advise against it. The music industry is a brutal place. Just ask Marcus Wells." With that parting shot, Maris left, her perfume lingering in the air like a toxic cloud. Zahara leaned against the bathroom counter, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. She had expected some fallout from the gala, but not this. Not Maris's thinly veiled accusations, not the rearrangement of her entire work schedule to keep her away from Graham. The envelope in her pocket suddenly felt heavy. Glancing around to make sure she was alone, Zahara pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a note written in Graham's distinctive handwriting. "Zahara, what you did at the gala was extraordinary. Your voice moved everyone who heard it, including me, perhaps especially me. I've taken the liberty of setting up a meeting for you with James Collins at Riverfront Records. He was at the gala and was as impressed as I was. The meeting is this Wednesday at 2 p.m. I hope you'll go. Your gift deserves to be shared. If you decide this is a path you want to explore, please know that I will support you however I can, whether that means flexible work hours, a leave of absence, or whatever else you might need. Your voice awakened something in me that I thought was long dead. Thank you for that unexpected gift. Graham Zahara read the note twice, her emotions a confused jumble. Graham had set up a meeting for her with a record executive. He was offering to help her pursue singing professionally. It was generous, thoughtful, and completely inappropriate given Maris's concerns. She carefully folded the note and put it back in the envelope. Whatever her feelings about Graham, and she wasn't ready to examine those too closely, she couldn't let herself be the cause of more conflict in his marriage. And she couldn't afford to lose this job, not yet. Not until she had something else lined up. The meeting with Riverfront Records, though, that was a different matter. That was about her voice, her gift, her future. And no one, not Maris Whitmore, not even her own fears, had the right to take that from her again. Wednesday afternoon found Zahara sitting in the reception area of Riverfront Records, nervously smoothing the skirt of the simple blue dress she'd bought for the occasion. It was the first new piece of clothing she'd purchased for herself in over a year, a small extravagance that felt like a statement of intent. "Miss Price?" The receptionist smiled at her. "Mr. Collins will see you now." Heart-pounding, Zahara followed the young woman down a hallway, lined with platinum records and publicity photos of famous artists. At the end of the hall was a large corner office with windows overlooking the river. James Collins rose from behind his desk as she entered, a tall, lean black man in his 50s, with salt-and-pepper hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Zahara Price," he said, extending his hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." Zahara shook his hand, surprised by the warmth of his greeting. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Collins." "James, please." He gestured for her to take a seat. "I have to tell you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about your performance at the Whitmore Gala. In 30 years in this business, I've rarely heard a voice with such authenticity." "Thank you," Zahara said, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. It had been a long time since I'd sung in public. "So Graham Whitmore mentioned. He also said you used to write your own music?" Zahara hesitated. "Yes, a long time ago. Any chance you've started again? Or kept any of your old material?" She thought of the notebook hidden at the bottom of her dresser drawer, filled with songs she'd written over the years but never shared, songs that had been her only outlet during the long silence. "I have some things," she admitted. "Nothing polished. I'd love to hear them." James leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Look, Zahara, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think you have extraordinary potential. Your voice, your presence, they're special. And in this industry, special is what we're always looking for. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet. Just think about it." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and handed it to her. "This is a standard development deal. 6 months to work with our producers, develop your sound, record some demos. We'll provide a small stipend so you can focus on the music. If things go well, we move to a full recording contract." Zahara's hands trembled as she took the folder. This was everything she had dreamed of at 18, before Marcus, before the betrayal, before she'd buried her voice and her ambitions. "It's a lot to take in," James acknowledged. "Take the contract home, read it. Have a lawyer look at it if you want, but I should tell you Graham Whitmore has already offered to cover any legal fees." He smiled at her surprised expression. "He believes in you, Zahara, and after hearing you sing, so do I." "Can I ask you something, James?" Zahara said, finding her voice. "Why me? Why now? There are so many talented singers out there, younger than me, with more experience, more connections." "True," he agreed, "but they don't have what you have. When you sang at that gala, you weren't performing, you were revealing. There's a lifetime in your voice, Zahara. Joy, pain, resilience. You can't fake that, and you can't teach it." He leaned back in his chair. "As for why now, sometimes life has its own timing. The question is whether you're ready to embrace it." Was she ready? After 10 years of silence, of hiding, of playing it safe? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. "I need some time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course, take a week, but Zahara?" His expression turned serious. "Don't let fear make this decision for you. You've already lost too much time to that." Zahara left Riverfront Records in a daze, the contract folder clutched to her chest like a precious thing. The afternoon sun sparkled on the river as she walked along the waterfront, trying to sort through her tumultuous thoughts. A record deal, a chance to sing again, to write again, to be the person she had once dreamed of becoming. It seemed impossible, like something that happened to other people, not to women like her who cleaned houses and lived paycheck to paycheck. But it was real. The folder in her hands proved it. She found a bench overlooking the water and sat down, opening the folder to skim the contract inside. It was full of legal terms she didn't fully understand, but the basics were clear enough. 6 months, a modest stipend, no guarantee of a full contract afterward, but a real chance. A door opening where she had thought all doors were closed. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Graham. How did the meeting go? She stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Since their brief encounter at the gala, they hadn't spoken. She had deliberately avoided him, working the new hours Maris had assigned her. But she had felt his presence in the house nonetheless, had been aware of the notes he left for her with Luan, the small ways he tried to communicate. After a moment's hesitation, she typed, "It went well. Thank you for setting it up. They offered me a development deal." His response came almost immediately. "That's wonderful news. I knew they would see what I saw. What are you thinking?" What was she thinking? That was the question, wasn't it? She was thinking about her mother's medical bills, about rent, about security. She was thinking about dreams deferred and chances not taken. She was thinking about Graham Whitmore and the way he looked at her when she sang, like she was something precious, something extraordinary. "I'm thinking it's scary," she wrote back honestly, "and complicated." A pause then. "I understand. But Zahara, please don't let the complications stop you. Not again." She stared at the message. How did he know? How did he understand so well the war being waged inside her? "I need to get back to work," she texted, avoiding the heart of the matter. "Of course. But Zahara, I'm proud of you, whatever you decide." The simple words brought unexpected tears to her eyes. When was the last time someone had been proud of her? When was the last time someone had believed in her possibilities rather than her limitations? As she walked back toward the bus stop, Zahara made a decision. She would talk to her mother tonight. She would look at their finances, figure out if they could manage on the stipend Riverfront was offering. And if not, if the practical realities outweighed the dream, then at least she would have considered it, would have allowed herself to imagine a different future. That was progress, wasn't it? After 10 years of refusing to even dream? Esther was having a good day when Zahara got home. She was sitting up in the living room watching her favorite game show and working on a crossword puzzle. The sight of her mother's bright eyes and alert expression eased some of the worry that had been sitting like a stone in Zahara's chest. "There's my superstar," Esther said with a grin. "How was your big meeting?" Zahara sat down beside her mother and told her everything. About James Collins, about the development deal, about the stipend that was less than she made at the Whitmores, but might be enough if they were careful. "Let me see that contract," Esther said when Zahara had finished. She put on her reading glasses and began going through the pages with surprising thoroughness. 6-month commitment. They own publishing on anything you create during that period. Standard stuff, but you'll want a lawyer to look at these royalty percentages." Zahara stared at her mother in surprise. "How do you know about royalty percentages?" Esther gave her a look over the top of her glasses. "Girl, who do you think handled all the contracts when your daddy and I ran that catering business? I may not have a fancy degree, but I know how to read the fine print." She turned back to the contract. "Overall, it's not a bad deal for a new artist. But the real question is, do you want it?" "I think I do," Zahara said softly, "but I'm scared, Mama. What if I fail? What if I give up my job and then nothing comes of this and we can't pay your medical bills or the rent? What if the sky falls and we all get hit on the head?" Esther interrupted. "Baby, there are a million what-ifs in life. You can't let them paralyze you. But your care will be managed," Esther said firmly. "I've been thinking about this since the gala. If you get a chance to pursue your music again, I want you to take it. We can move to a smaller apartment. I can apply for additional assistance programs. There are options, Zahara. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering." Esther took her daughter's hand. "For 10 years, I've watched you put your life on hold for me, working jobs beneath your talent, coming straight home every night to take care of your old mama, never taking a chance on your own dreams." "That was my choice," Zahara insisted. "Was it? Or was it just easier than facing what happened with Marcus? Easier than risking your heart again, whether on music or on love?" The question hit too close to home. Zahara looked away, unable to meet her mother's knowing gaze. "This isn't just about the record deal, is it?" Esther asked gently. It's about Graham Whitmore, too. Zahara's head snapped up. No, it's not. Zahara Joy, I've known you your whole life. You can't lie to me. Esther's voice was kind but firm. That man means something to you. And from what you've told me, what I've pieced together, you mean something to him too. He's married, Mama. Yes, he is. To a woman who treats him like a possession, not a partner. To a woman who uses her position to make others feel small. Esther shook her head. I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm just saying it makes it human. Nothing has happened between us, Zahara said firmly. Nothing will happen. Maybe not. But his belief in you, his support of your talent, that's real. And it's valuable. Don't throw that away because you're afraid of the feelings that come with it. Zahara was silent, absorbing her mother's words. Was she right? Had Zahara been hiding from more than just the memory of Marcus's betrayal? Had she been hiding from the possibility of connection, of vulnerability, of being seen? I think you should take the deal, Esther said after a moment. Not for Graham Whitmore, not for me, not for anybody but yourself, because that voice of yours deserves to be heard. Looking into her mother's eyes, seeing the unwavering belief there, Zahara felt something shift inside her, a final piece of resistance giving way. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. Esther's face broke into a wide smile. That's my girl. The next morning, Zahara arrived at the Whitmore mansion earlier than usual. She had a plan. She would speak to Maris first, give her proper notice, explain the situation professionally. It was the right thing to do, the respectful thing, despite the tension between them. But as she entered the kitchen, she found not Maris but Graham, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and the morning paper. He looked up when she came in, his face brightening. Zahara. Good morning. Mr. Whitmore. She kept her tone formal, aware of Luan's presence at the stove. I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you'd be at the office by now. I had some things to take care of at home first. His eyes searched hers. How are you? I've hardly seen you all week. Because your wife made sure of it, Zahara thought, but didn't say. I'm well, thank you. Actually, I was hoping to speak with Mrs. Whitmore. Is she available? She's out. Breakfast meeting with her charity committee. Graham stood up. But I'm here. Is there something I can help with? Zahara hesitated, glancing at Luan, who was making a poor show of not listening. It's a work matter, she said carefully. Understanding dawned in Graham's eyes. Why don't we step into my office? Luan raised her eyebrows but said nothing as Zahara followed Graham out of the kitchen and down the hall to his home office. It was a warm, inviting space, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and large windows overlooking the garden. Please sit, Graham said, gesturing to one of the comfortable chairs in front of his desk, but instead of going behind the desk himself, he took the chair beside hers, turning it to face her. You've made a decision about the record deal. It wasn't a question, but Zahara nodded anyway. Yes, I'm going to accept it. Graham's face broke into a wide smile. That's wonderful news, Zahara. Truly wonderful. It means I'll have to leave my position here, she said, watching his expression carefully. I wanted to give Mrs. Whitmore proper notice. 2 weeks, of course, so she has time to find a replacement. Of course. Graham's smile dimmed slightly. She'll be disappointed to lose you. Zahara couldn't help the small, skeptical sound that escaped her. I think Mrs. Whitmore will manage just fine without me. You're probably right, Graham sighed, running a hand through his hair. Things have been tense since the gala. I know, and I'm sorry for that. It wasn't my intention to cause problems in your home. You didn't cause anything, Graham said firmly. If anything, you just illuminated what was already there. The echo of Maris's mocking words from the gala night hung between them. Mr. Whitmore. Graham, Zahara corrected herself, deciding that formality was pointless now. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. Why did you help me? The meeting with Riverfront, the offer to pay for legal advice. Why go to such lengths for someone who works for you? Graham was silent for a moment, considering. The simple answer is that I believe in your talent. When you sang at the gala, it was transcendent, the kind of gift that deserves to be shared with the world. And the complicated answer, his eyes met hers, honest and unguarded. The complicated answer is that when you sang, I remembered what it feels like to be moved, to be touched by something real and true, and I realized how rarely I feel that anymore. In my work, in my marriage, in my life. He leaned forward slightly. You woke something up in me, Zahara, something I thought was dead, and I'm grateful for that, whether or not you ever sing again. The raw honesty of his words left Zahara speechless. This wasn't a man trying to seduce her, trying to possess her. This was someone recognizing in her what she was only beginning to recognize in herself, the power of authenticity, of living truthfully. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything. Just be who you are. Sing your songs. Let your voice be heard." Graham smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "And know that wherever you go from here, whatever you do, there's at least one person in the world who sees you, really sees you." The moment stretched between them, filled with things unsaid but understood. In another life, in another story, perhaps there could have been more, but in this one, there were boundaries that neither of them were willing to cross. "Thank you," Zahara said finally. "For everything," Graham nodded, accepting the limitations of what could be. "Will you let me know how it goes? At Riverfront?" "Yes," she promised. "I will." As she rose to leave, Graham reached out and briefly touched her hand, a fleeting contact that nonetheless sent warmth coursing through her. "Zahara," he said softly, "be extraordinary." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Zahara worked her notice at the Whitmore mansion, training the young woman Maris hired to replace her. She signed the contract with Riverfront Records after having it reviewed by a lawyer Graham recommended and insisted on paying for. She and her mother began the process of looking for a smaller, more affordable apartment, one that would still accommodate Esther's mobility needs. Through it all, Zahara felt a strange mix of excitement and sadness. Excitement for what lay ahead, for the chance to reclaim her voice and her dreams. Sadness for what she was leaving behind, the security of a steady job, the familiar routines, and yes, the daily proximity to Graham. She saw little of him during those final weeks. He was busy with a new project at work, and Maris made sure their paths rarely crossed at home. But he left notes for her, small encouragements tucked into places only she would find: her cleaning caddy, the pocket of her work apron, the pages of the book she kept in the staff break room. "Your courage inspires me. Remember to trust your instincts in the studio. They're good ones. The world is ready for your voice." Each note she saved in a small box, along with the first one he'd given her after the gala. They were tangible reminders of someone who believed in her, who saw beyond the uniform and the role to the person beneath. Maris, meanwhile, maintained a cold civility that barely masked her relief at Zahara's departure. On Zahara's last day, she handed her the final paycheck with a tight smile. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said, her tone suggesting anything but. "Not everyone gets to leave domestic service for a recording studio." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore," Zahara said, refusing to rise to the bait. "I hope you know what you're doing," Maris continued. "The music industry can be brutal, especially for someone your age." At 26, Zahara was hardly ancient, but she understood what Maris was implying, that she had missed her window, that it was too late for her to pursue this dream. "I'll keep that in mind," she said calmly. Maris studied her for a moment, something almost like respect flickering in her eyes. "You've changed," she observed, "since the gala. You're different." "No, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm the same as I've always been. You're just seeing me now." Maris had no response to that. With a nod that might have been acknowledgement, she turned and walked away, leaving Zahara to say her goodbyes to the rest of the staff. Luann cried and made Zahara promise to call. Carl gave her a bouquet of flowers from the garden. Even Mrs. Peterson, the stern head housekeeper, wished her well and said they'd be watching for her on the radio, but there was no sign of Graham. Zahara told herself it was better this way, cleaner, simpler. A proper goodbye would only make things more complicated, would only blur the lines they had both been careful to maintain. As she gathered her few personal belongings and prepared to leave the Whitmore mansion for the last time, Zahara couldn't help but feel that a chapter was closing. For 10 years, she had defined herself by her limitations, by what she couldn't or shouldn't do. Now she was stepping into a future defined by possibility. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Zahara took one last look at the grand house, at the life she was leaving behind. Then she turned toward the gate, toward whatever came next. "Zahara!" She stopped at the sound of Graham's voice. He was standing by the garden path, as if he'd been waiting for her. "I thought you were at the office," she said, her heart beating faster despite her best intentions. "I couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye." He approached her, stopping a respectful distance away. "And without giving you this." He held out a small wrapped package. Zahara took it hesitantly. "What is it?" "Open it." She carefully removed the wrapping paper to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal. On the first page, Graham had written, for your songs, for your truth, for your voice. Gee, I thought you might need somewhere to keep your new music, he explained. Somewhere special. Tears pricked at Zahara's eyes. It was such a simple gift, but so perfectly thoughtful, acknowledging not just who she had been, but who she was becoming. Thank you, she said softly. I'll use it well. Graham nodded, his eyes saying all the things his words could not. I know you will. For a moment they stood there, so much left unsaid between them. In another world, perhaps, the story might have been different. But in this one, they both knew the lines that couldn't be crossed. Goodbye, Graham, Zahara said finally. Not goodbye, he corrected gently. Just until we meet again. With a last smile that contained both sadness and hope, Zahara turned and walked through the gate, the journal clutched to her chest, like a promise of things to come. Graham watched her go, standing motionless until she disappeared from view. Then he turned back to the house, to his life, to his choices, to the path he had chosen, but was beginning to question. As for Zahara, she didn't look back. She had spent too many years looking backward, dwelling on what might have been. Now it was time to look forward, to her voice, to her music, to the woman she was finally allowing herself to become. The sun was setting as she reached the bus stop, casting everything in a golden glow that felt like a blessing, like a sign. She opened the journal Graham had given her and, on the second page, wrote the first line of a new song. This is the voice I tried to bury. The words came easily, flowing from a place that had been locked away for too long. By the time the bus arrived, she had filled 3 pages, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Tomorrow, she would begin her new life at Riverfront Records. Tomorrow, she would step into the studio and let her voice soar again. Tomorrow, she would embrace all the possibilities that had once seemed lost to her. But today, right now, she was simply Zahara Price, a woman who had found the courage to sing again, and that was more than enough. 6 months had passed since Zahara Price first stepped into Riverfront Records. 6 months of long days in the studio, of writing and rewriting, of finding her voice again, not just as a singer but as an artist with something to say. The small apartment she now shared with her mother in a modest part of town was a far cry from the grandeur of the Whitmore mansion, but it had become a home filled with music and laughter. Esther's health had stabilized under the care of a new specialist James Collins had recommended, and while money was still tight, the stipend from Riverfront made it manageable. Today was the day Zahara had been both anticipating and dreading, the end of her development contract, the day when James would decide whether to offer her a full recording deal. She had poured everything into the 6 songs they'd produced, her history, her pain, her journey back to herself. Now it was time to see if it was enough. She dressed carefully in a simple yellow dress that made her dark skin glow, the same coral earrings her mother had worn during her own brief singing career, and the one extravagance she'd allowed herself since starting at Riverfront, a pair of comfortable but stylish boots that made her feel grounded and confident. You look beautiful, Esther said, as Zahara came into the living room. Like a star. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mama, Zahara said, though she couldn't help smiling. We don't know what James is going to say yet. I know, Esther replied with certainty. That man would be a fool to let you go, and James Collins is no fool. Zahara bent to kiss her mother's cheek. Your faith in me never wavers, does it? Not once in 26 years. Esther squeezed her hand. Now go get that contract, and don't you dare come home without it. The offices of Riverfront Records had become familiar territory over the past 6 months. Zahara greeted the receptionist with a smile as she made her way to James's office, her heart pounding but her step steady. She found him listening to what she recognized as the final mix of Summertime, the song that had started it all at the Whitmore Gala. They had recorded a new version, one that honored the classic but was unmistakably hers, raw, soulful, with a touch of something modern in the arrangement. James looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. Zahara, right on time. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Have a seat. She sat, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from fidgeting. So, she said, aiming for casual but missing by a mile. Today's the day. Today's the day, James agreed, turning off the music. He studied her for a moment. 6 months ago, I took a chance on a maid who sang one song at a charity gala. Everyone thought I was crazy. She's too old to launch, they said. She's been out of the game too long. She doesn't have the look, the connections, the social media presence. Zahara's heart sank. This wasn't starting well. But, James continued, a smile finally breaking through his serious demeanor, I just got off the phone with our distribution partners. They listened to your EP, and Zahara, they're fighting over who gets first rights. It took a moment for his words to register. What? We're offering you a full 3-album deal. James pulled a contract from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. Better terms than the development deal, full creative control on the first album, and a proper advance, enough to take care of your mother's medical bills and then some. Zahara stared at the contract, unable to fully process what was happening. Are you serious? Completely. Your EP is going to drop next month. We're starting with Summertime as the lead single, then the song I Tried to Bury 2 weeks later. James leaned forward, his expression earnest. Zahara, what you've created here isn't just good music. It's truth. It's the kind of art that changes people. And right now, that's what the world is hungry for. Tears filled Zahara's eyes. After so many years of silence, of hiding, of believing her chance had passed, here it was. A second chance. A new beginning. Thank you, she managed to say, for believing in me, for giving me this opportunity. Don't thank me, James said. This isn't a gift, you earned it. Every note, every word, every late night in that studio, you earned this. He handed her a pen. Now, sign that contract and let's get to work. We've got an album to finish. With a steady hand, Zahara signed her name, feeling as though she was signing not just a recording contract, but a declaration of who she truly was. An artist, a singer, a woman with a voice that deserved to be heard. Later that afternoon, as Zahara walked along the riverfront, still dazed with the reality of what had happened, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number she didn't recognize. Congratulations on the contract. I just heard the news from James. So proud of you. G. Graham. Her heart did a small flip in her chest. In the 6 months since she'd left the Whitmore mansion, she had thought of him often, had wondered how he was, whether he was happy. But she had resisted the urge to reach out, to blur the lines they had so carefully maintained. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, "Thank you, for everything. I couldn't have done it without you believing in me first." His response came quickly. "You would have found your way eventually. Your voice is too powerful to stay buried forever. But I'm glad I got to witness the moment it broke free." There was an undercurrent to his words, a warmth that made Zahara both happy and uneasy. She didn't know what to say, how to respond without crossing into territory that felt dangerous, complicated. While she was still pondering, another text came through. "I have news too. Maris and I are separating. It's been a long time coming, but I finally found the courage to make a change. Seeing you reclaim your voice helped me find mine." Zahara stared at the message, a mix of emotions washing over her. She felt sorry for the end of a marriage, even one as troubled as the Whitmores. But she also felt a flutter of something she didn't dare name, something like possibility. Before she could respond, one more message appeared. "I'm not telling you this with any expectations. I know you're focused on your music, as you should be. I just wanted you to know that I'm finding my way too. Take care, Zahara, and keep singing." She read the message twice, understanding what he was and wasn't saying. He was giving her space, respecting her journey, acknowledging that this was her time to focus on her music, on herself. But he was also leaving a door open for someday, perhaps, when the timing was right. After careful thought, she wrote back, "I'm sorry about your marriage, but glad you're finding your voice. Mine is stronger every day. Thank you for being part of that journey. Simple, honest, neither encouraging nor discouraging, whatever might come next." Because the truth was, Zahara didn't know what she wanted beyond this moment. This perfect day when her dreams were finally within reach, when the voice she had tried to bury had risen, clear and strong, to claim its rightful place in the world. 2 months later, Zahara stood backstage at Charleston's historic Riverfront Theatre, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The venue was sold out, 300 people waiting to hear her sing. Her EP had dropped 3 weeks earlier to surprising success. Summertime had been featured on several influential streaming playlists, and the song I Tried to Bury, the title track she had written about reclaiming her voice, had resonated deeply with listeners, earning her interviews on local radio and even a small feature in a national magazine. Now came the moment of truth, her first real performance since the Whitmore Gala, her official introduction to the world not as a maid who could sing, but as Zahara Price, recording artist. "5 minutes, Miss Price," the stage manager said, poking his head into her dressing room. "Thank you," she replied, smoothing the front of her dress, a new one, custom made for the occasion, in the same coral shade as her mother's old gown, but with a modern cut that felt distinctly her own. There was a knock at the door and James Collins entered, carrying a bouquet of white roses. "These just arrived for you," he said, handing them to her with a smile. "Looks like you have an admirer." Zahara took the flowers, finding a small card nestled among the blooms. It read simply, "Sing your heart out. I'll be listening. G." A rush of warmth spread through her. She had not seen Graham since leaving the Whitmore mansion, though they had exchanged occasional texts, brief, friendly messages that carefully avoided crossing any lines. She knew from local gossip that his separation from Maris had become common knowledge, that he had moved into an apartment downtown while divorce proceedings began. She had deliberately not sought more information, had focused instead on her music, on building the foundation of her new life. But knowing he was here tonight in the audience, listening, it meant more than she wanted to admit. "Someone special?" James asked, noting her expression. "Someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she said simply. James nodded, understanding without needing details. "Well, it's time to show them, to show everyone, what you can do." He squeezed her shoulder encouragingly. "Ready?" Zahara took a deep breath, centering herself. "Ready." The stage lights were bright, momentarily blinding as Zahara walked out to enthusiastic applause. She couldn't see individual faces in the audience, just a sea of expectant shadows beyond the glare of the spotlights. Her band, 4 talented musicians James had assembled, began the intro to her first song, a gentle ballad about new beginnings. Zahara closed her eyes, feeling the music wash over her, through her. Then she began to sing. From the first note, she knew this night was different from the gala. There she had been reclaiming something lost, breaking through years of silence and fear. Here, she was stepping fully into who she was meant to be, offering her gift with confidence, with joy. The audience responded to that joy, that authenticity. They clapped, they swayed, they called out encouragement. When she sang "The Song I Tried to Bury," she heard sniffles from the front rows, saw tissues being passed. Her story, of silence and reclamation, of hiding and being found, was resonating with others who had buried parts of themselves too. After 40 minutes that felt like both an eternity and an instant, Zahara reached her final song of the night. "Thank you all for coming," she said into the microphone, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. "This last song is special to me. It's about second chances, about the courage it takes to start over, to be seen. It's called Freedom Gala, and I wrote it for someone who saw me when I couldn't see myself." The lights dimmed slightly, a single spotlight illuminating her as the band began a soft, jazzy introduction. And as Zahara sang, about masks falling away, about true seeing, about the liberation of being known, she allowed her gaze to sweep the audience, wondering if he was out there, if he understood this was for him. In the third row, a tall figure stood slightly apart from the others. The spotlight briefly caught his face, Graham watching her with an expression of such pride, such open admiration, that Zahara felt her voice grow stronger, more confident. She finished the song with a sustained note that seemed to hang in the air even after she fell silent. For a moment, there was no sound at all. Then the audience erupted. Applause, cheers, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old theatre. Zahara bowed, tears of joy and release streaming down her face. This was what she had been born for, what she had almost lost, what she had finally reclaimed. As she left the stage to continued applause, she saw her mother waiting in the wings, beaming with pride. "You did it, baby," Esther said, embracing her tightly. "You really did it." "We did it, Mama," Zahara corrected, hugging her back. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The theatre lobby was crowded with well-wishers after the show, friends, fans, music industry people James had invited. Zahara moved through them in a daze of gratitude and exhaustion, accepting congratulations, answering questions, promising future performances. And then, at the edge of the crowd, she saw him. Graham stood a little apart from the others, watching her with a smile that held both pride and something more, something that made her heart beat faster despite her best intentions. She made her way toward him, aware of curious eyes following her progress. "You came," she said simply when she reached him. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." His eyes took in her flushed face, her shining eyes. "You were magnificent, Zahara, even better than at the gala." "That's because I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "I'm not hiding. It shows." Graham hesitated, then added softly, "The last song, was that?" "Yes," she admitted. "It was for you, for what you did for me." I didn't do anything except see what was already there. Sometimes that's the greatest gift anyone can give. Zahara was acutely aware of the people around them, of the lines that still existed despite his separation from Maris. How are you? Really? Graham considered the question. I'm finding my way. It's not easy, starting over at 42, but it's necessary. His eyes held hers. What about you? You seem radiant. I'm happy, she said, realizing as she spoke that it was true, deeply, fundamentally true in a way it hadn't been for years. I'm doing what I love. I'm taking care of my mother. I'm free. Freedom looks good on you, Graham said softly. Before Zahara could respond, James appeared at her elbow. Sorry to interrupt, but there are some people you need to meet. He nodded politely to Graham. Mr. Whitmore, good to see you again. You too, James. Congratulations on discovering such an extraordinary talent. Oh, I can't take credit for discovery. I just provided the platform. James gave Zahara a meaningful look. Take your time, but when you're ready, there's a producer from Atlanta I want you to meet. He's interested in collaborating on the full album. As James moved away, Zahara turned back to Graham. I should go. Of course. He hesitated, then said, Zahara, I know this isn't the right time. You're just starting this journey, and I'm still untangling my life. But when things settle, when you're established and I'm truly free, I'd like to take you to dinner. Just dinner. To talk. To see where things might go. The straightforwardness of his request, the lack of pressure or expectation touched Zahara deeply. This was a man who respected her journey, who understood that her career, her independence, had to come first, right now. I'd like that, she said honestly. When the time is right. Graham smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'll be waiting, not passively. I have my own work to do, my own path to find, but I'll be here, when you're ready. He leaned in, and very gently kissed her cheek, a chaste gesture, yet one that held promise, possibility. Good night, Zahara Price. Keep shining. As he walked away, Zahara touched her cheek, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the stage lights or the crowded room. Then she straightened her shoulders and turned to join James, to meet the producer from Atlanta, to take another step on this new path she was creating. 1 year later, Zahara stood on a much larger stage in New York City, looking out at an audience of thousands. Her debut album, The Song I Tried to Bury, had exceeded everyone's expectations, earning critical acclaim and building a devoted following that crossed generations and backgrounds. She was opening for a well-established artist on a national tour, gaining exposure and experience that would serve her well when she headlined her own tour the following year. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible when she'd first stepped onto the stage at the Whitmore Gala. As the band began the introduction to her final song of the night, Zahara spoke into the microphone. This last song is about second chances, about the courage it takes to be seen, really seen, for who you are. About finding your voice again after silence. She smiled, her eyes finding a familiar face in the front row. It's called Freedom Gala, and tonight I'm singing it for someone special, someone who showed me that it's never too late to start again. Graham sat in the audience, watching her with the same admiration, the same belief he had shown from the beginning. But now, there was something else in his gaze too, something warmer, more intimate. The look of a man who was no longer just a supporter but a partner, a companion on the journey. Their dinner, when it finally happened 6 months after her first performance, had turned into many dinners, many conversations, a slow and careful building of something that honored both their pasts and their potential future. With his divorce finalized and her career established, they had found their way to each other, not as employer and employee, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, as two people who had helped each other find their true voices. As Zahara sang the final notes of Freedom Gala, her voice soaring to the rafters of the concert hall, she felt a completion, a full circle moment that brought tears to her eyes. The song she had tried to bury had risen, had taken flight, had become a gift not just for herself but for anyone who had ever been silenced, anyone who had ever lost their way. When the song ended and the applause thundered through the hall, Zahara didn't bow right away. Instead, she looked directly at Graham and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." He shook his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, and mouthed back, "Thank you." And in that exchange, that mutual recognition, was everything they had given each other. Courage, belief, the freedom to become who they were meant to be. Not a rescue, but a reciprocal awakening. Not dependency, but partnership. Later that night, As they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of New York, Zahara thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the silent maid in the Whitmore mansion to the woman who now sang her truth to thousands. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, doubts, moments when the old fears threatened to resurface. But through it all, she had kept singing, had kept moving forward, had refused to bury her voice again. "What are you thinking?" Graham asked, squeezing her hand gently. Zahara looked up at him, at the man who had first seen beyond her silence to the song within. "I was thinking about that night at the gala, about how scared I was, how certain I was that I'd regret it." "And do you regret it?" "Not for a second," she said, her voice firm. "It was the moment everything changed, the moment I remembered who I really am." Graham stopped walking, turning to face her. "And who are you, Zahara Price?" She smiled, the certainty of her answer filling her with a quiet joy. "I'm a woman with a voice that deserves to be heard." "Yes," Graham said softly, drawing her close. "You always were." As they continued their walk through the city that never sleeps, Zahara felt the rightness of it all, the journey, the struggle, the song that refused to stay buried. And she knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that whatever came next, whatever challenges, whatever triumphs, she would face it with her voice strong, her heart open, and her song rising clear and true into the waiting world, because that was who she was, who she had always been. A woman with a song that could not, would not stay buried. The end.